In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Hello, everybody. Hope you are doing great. You're watching FOADEBATE. Today, we are joined by Professor Anthony James Hall, a distinguished expert and a researcher in political science from Canada, to explore the future of international cooperation in a multipolar world and the roles that the United States and the European Union will play in this era. Welcome, Professor Hall, to my program. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
It's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. The first question I'd like to ask is about the recent meeting between Trump and European leaders regarding the Ukraine issue. From my perspective, this meeting reflects an actually effort to redefine the roles of the US and the EU in the Ukrainian crisis. Could this be linked to the decline of West hegemony and the rise of emerging powers? Do you agree with me that this meeting indicates an attempt to revive America's leadership role in Europe, or perhaps it is a sign of shared responsibilities in a multipolar world?
Well, one thing was very clear. The meeting of Trump with the Europeans, Merz, Starmer, Macron, von Leyen, and all, this was in sharp contrast to the nature of his meeting with Putin. Clearly, his meeting with Putin was much deeper in his understanding of what he's trying to do. And it had a lot of consequences. I think behind the scenes, it's quite possible that we're not only seeing negotiations having to do with Ukraine, but negotiations having to do with global economics. For instance, Russia has all of this money sitting there that has been seized, all these assets. Well, I think Trump would like very much if it would be invested in his, plan to industrialize the United States and to have a partner with Russia in that. The next day was a big contrast where it was very clear that Trump is not on the same page with Zelensky and von Leyen and Starmer and Macron and the man from Finland. That there was clearly he was going through the motions of giving an audience, but he has his heart is elsewhere. He's known Putin for a long time. I think Putin, because he is in power for a long time and has found a formula to become a very stable leader of his country over decades now. This may be what Trump has in mind for himself. He may look sort of enviously at that. So the idea that the two big superpowers, especially by way of nuclear weapons and military, could I say prowess? Certainly in the case of Russia, it's prowess. I don't know if it's in the case of the United States, it's something different. It's not exactly skillful how that system is being used, but it's an enormously powerful system. And to have some kind of sense that there is some meeting of the minds there, that maybe people are thinking in terms of like a tunnel under the Bering Strait or a highway over the Bering Strait, extending the Road and Belt Initiative, into the Western Hemisphere, and doing business, and China and the United States and Russia coming together in a certain way and giving the world a framework of stability. In the meantime, we seem to have these kind of holdbacks, these reminders of Europe's worst era, where it really was a global power that took over lands, assassinated, did genocide on large numbers of people, stole their resources, enslaved them. Europe. There were some things that were to admire in the European empires, but there was a lot of ruthlessness and violence, and I think we can just see that the current crop coming out of Europe, European Union, Western Europe, they don't really seem to be independent players. They seem to be stage managed puppets, really, for something higher. Anyway, it was something to see them try to make their pitches, looking kind of embarrassed, because it is embarrassing. Like, Ukraine is not a credible polity. It's a very evil, crime-ridden polity, known for, trafficking in children, trafficking in organs, black markets in weapons. Zelensky is an absolutely reprehensible sort of dictator. And for some reason, he has like this enormous hold over Trudeau. Actually seemed to be lovers when I was watching them carefully. It's peculiar to see. Certainly Starmer seems to, his crank is turned somehow. Like there's all kinds of weird things. And these are people who are, pretty much the type of pedophiles and such that we read about in the Jeffrey Epstein matter. These people are being protected. So the current crop of people in control of Europe, not to say that Trump himself is a paragon of virtue or anything, he would be involved in these things himself, and almost certainly is. And almost will certainly have a lot of surprises coming into the autumn, because he has a dark past with Jeffrey Epstein. They have done terrible things to underage women. Do we call them children? Do we call them girls? Even boys. So there's this sort of pattern playing out, this drama playing out of the Western hedonism, the corruption, the internal corruption, the fact that people can get ahead who have these kind of histories. In fact, I think Israel likes it when they have these kind of histories, because they can be blackmailed and such. So all of this was on display, but it did seem to me that the sort of towering reality that is something to embrace is that Trump and Putin seem to have an understanding on a human level that the United States is actually developing formal diplomatic relations, and how much can Trump live very long doing that? I mean, there's always these questions. We live in a ruthless time. Ukraine, doesn't have a real government because he's not elected, Zelensky, and he says, did you notice him saying, oh, well, we can't have an election when a war is on? You could see Trump's ears perking up, and, he must be thinking about, well, I don't really want to, give up the office of president. So anyway, that's how an overview of how I'm seeing the current interactions at the highest level of politics, especially with a spotlight on Western Europe, Trump, and Putin.
Fantastic. And how do you think other global powers such as Russia, China, and even BRICS member countries will react to this meeting? Could this lead to the creation of a new framework for international cooperation, or should the US and Europe admit that they are struggling to even control Russia?
Well, this idea that you have to sort of dismantle Russia and destroy it, I look at that from the point of view of Canada, where we have a similar thing. We have a vast country, right, full of natural resources, a very small population, and people are kind of circling around, powerful people circling around these resources and thinking, how can we get rid of the existing regime and somehow tie these resources to our own struggling banking system. So I personally would like to see Canada become a ally of Russia. We share so much. We share winter, we share a border in the north, we share, the Arctic. Apparently Trump is talking as if he controls the Arctic, and I guess they do militarily, but technically speaking, this is part of Canada. And of course, the over-the-top transportation corridors are going to be huge in the future. But just bring me up to speed on that question, because this was a prelude, but bring me up to speed on the question you just asked me.
Could this lead to the creation of a new framework for international cooperation?
Yes. Well, I think, this framework is sort of already in place, and there are historical roots to this. Like BRICS didn't just pop out of nowhere. There was in the 1950s this non-aligned movement, which was a very big formal thing. It was, created in Bandung in 1955, and the concept was, the colonies are going to be self-governing in theory, but they're going to be, they're given a choice between, you're either going to do the US capitalist system or the Soviet socialist system, and you've got this dichotomy. You have to choose one or the other. And the movement, as far as I understood, was to say, hey, wait a minute, we some of our countries are huge. We have thousands of years of tradition and how we do things. And we don't want to be corralled into either system. We want to, what they called it in Canada, because Canadian Indians actually took up on this, they called it the fourth world. We're not the third world. You're calling us underdeveloped. That isn't the main thing about us. We are highly developed people. We have civilizations, we have languages, we have ways of doing our economic life. We have relationships with, nature, with food, with restoring ourselves, and with the minerals and how we use the minerals. And all of this we're treated as, undeveloped primitive peoples. Stop that. And so that, I think, persists. And that is, continues to be a theme of BRICS. And this idea that we resisted the kind of duality when it was a bipolar system, and now we certainly want to resist the effort to make us part of a single system. And although there was a kind of global approach, let's divide the world between the Soviet and U.S. sphere. But there was also this difference between, you guys are the colonizers. You took our lands, you made us into subject peoples, you disempowered us, Frans Fanon kind of thing, wretched of the earth. So we're different than you. Don't try to group us into your empire or the other empire. We're going to have our own multipolar existence. Similarly with the idea that now it's going to be a unipolar existence. After that, there was a time between the end of the Soviet Union and the beginning of the war on terror. There was a decade in there where, although it was a unipolar system, I remember it was a time where suddenly the system started telling us, you must hate these kind of people and love those kind of people. We were free on the internet to go out and seek our contacts and our friendships and collaborations in business or whatever it might be, and there was no pressure to say you must communicate only with those kind of people but not those other kind of people. Now we're under enormous pressure that way. And of course 9/11, which was a rigged thing, it was blamed on Islamic terrorism so the US could go ahead with its wars for Israel in Muslim majority countries in the Middle East. That's why 9/11 was done. It really divided people, and suddenly there was a kind of bipolar division, like all Muslims are dubious, all Muslims are questionable, all Arabs are dubious, and especially the Palestinians. And and it was a false flag. And so is October 7, 2023, a false flag. In both episodes, there's a Netanyahu in the background pulling the strings, trying to represent himself as some kind of savior of Western civilization, from the jungle bunnies, from the primitive peoples, from the peoples who can't be trusted to have like nuclear weapons, and people who have to be kind of kept sort of in some kind of cave-like structure and thrown a little bit of food once in a while. And certainly Netanyahu, like the most hated war criminal in the world. Imagine if your head of state is, wanted. He's a fugitive on the run, and so is so is Trump in a way. Now that he's, owns the genocide, he's the CEO of the genocide. He signs off on it all, like whatever process there needs to be. The United Nations has shown itself to be, an embodiment of victor's justice, and the United Nations has lost credibility. And so one of the things that, we have to find a way for it to happen is the UN is, it's a scam. Like we get stuff like, climate change, like they can't do the charter, the charter of the United Nations to have us in a non-militarized world. That they don't seem to have a handle on how to do that. They have the Chosenites who are above the law. But what we get from the United Nations is you have to do this and this and this, because unless you do it, we're going to contaminate the world with carbon, and carbon is so very, very bad. And it's a complete scam. And then, we get a taxation system from it, somehow managing to make the removal of carbon into a commodified property, which people like my own prime minister here in Canada, who took the position illegally and bended all the rules, Carney, former head of the Bank of England and this bank and that bank and the Bank of International Settlements, a total scam banker. Bankers are kind of the top of the crime heap nowadays. So that's, he just somehow comes in and just walks into the prime minister's job with no background, having run for nothing ever before. So these situations that we're facing with no real law and order, no real credible system where anybody can enforce the law. We see lots of people like myself spewing lots of words, I suppose, on the genocide. It is horrific. It's hard to believe they're actually doing this out in public, but it's words. And, what we see is after 2 years, there's no force. There's no way to enforce these laws. And it was not accidental. It was not inadvertent. It was planned that way. So we're getting, the UN is really a corrupt globalist institution representing the worst criminal elements at the highest level of our society. Not us. Nobody represents us. We the West, who have all this liberal democracy and all this, statement of principles after World War II of how we're going to be equal before the law and how we should respect human rights and civil liberties. All of that is just a fiction now. And so we look to the world. We look to, say Iran has been really colonized by the British Empire. It was colonized by the U.S. Empire. It was colonized, with the great help of Israel, who set up the prison system and all that. And so in a certain sense, there's a sort of bond between we in the West who've had, I guess we have privilege, and we did grow up in ways where we had, many of us had, financial wherewithal. I could have a pretty good life, a career in the universities until they blew the whistle on me in 2016 for getting a little bit too close and chummy with people in Iran and Palestine and all of those things. And suddenly, all the rules, I thought I was following all the rules, doing the peer-reviewed literature, and suddenly, oh no, there are no rules. You're fired. Your pay is cut to zero. I did get back into the system. I'm currently professor emeritus, but it was something to see the Israel lobby close up and how it is so organized to defame people, to ruin people, ruin people's reputations. And now it's trying to do it on a great scale with this idea, Trump following orders from Netanyahu, that, anybody who is criticizing Israel must be anti-Semitic. And to be anti-Semitic is to mean that you are with Hamas, that and this fiction of Hamas is the ultimate scapegoat, and everything bad happening, like no food and whatnot. Well, it's Hamas. They're stealing the food, and, this blaming of Hamas. So if you're in the United States and you are pro-Palestinian, you're going to be called an anti-Semite, and an anti-Semite is pretty much the same as being a terrorist. And when you're a terrorist, you can't have a job. You have to be punished. And this is what we're living in. This is what happened to the universities right now, because the top dogs in our society are the Zionists who, control the money. There's really the idea that the United States and Israel are two players on this, that they are two separate entities. No, they have merged. Let's call it a U.S.-Israeli partnership. So the U.S. is equally guilty of genocide. Trump is equally guilty of genocide with Netanyahu. And we're living in a system where, the U.S. says, oh, the International Criminal Court, they have to be sanctioned. Oh, we have to stop them from flying around. We have to punish them personally, this court. Like, who allows, if we're going to have a real criminal justice system, the people who are charged with things to walk in and say, well, throw over the tables of the judge's area in the courthouse and threaten them, put a gun to their head and say, hey, you better know where your bread is buttered on, Dick. It's just appalling what we're seeing. And then there is Trump in the government of Israel in the criminal process that they have against Netanyahu. And I think underneath this criminal process, which the Israelis themselves, the Israeli government, its judiciary, such as it is trying to impose, it's really coming down to October 7. What was going on in Netanyahu's office on that day. He clearly, not only knew about it, he was ordering things, no steps to be taken by the IDF to just kind of leave the door open. And he knew about it for a long time. And Hamas, let's face it, is a complex organization. It's factionalized. It's not one thing. And so you have the part of Hamas that is living in luxury, in Qatar, in palaces and things. And then you have this sort of incredible embodiment of a brave, fearless person, Sinwar, Yahya Sinwar, and and how he dies and everything. And so you have another faction of Hamas in the tunnels with the people, building up weapons out of pieces of weapons that have been left behind. So there's a real story there. And I think people in Israel sort of are understanding this. They don't want to talk about it, but they know that this idea that, Netanyahu doesn't want to release the hostages, they know too much. Think about the women who were watching the fence, in the months leading up to October 7th, the spotter women in the IDF who were reporting, we see Hamas, we know these guys, they're out there training right in front of our eyes. We've got our cameras planted on them. They send the information up the line of the chain of command within Israel. And lo and behold, along comes October 7, and right away, 15 of them are murdered on that day. Like, they know too much. They're getting rid of the evidence. So I know it's an answer that kind of is here, there, and everywhere, but I think you're probably interested to get an array of thoughts from me, I hope.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your comprehensive explanation. Considering all the discussions and analyses that you mentioned, what do you think the future of the global order will look like, and what challenges lie ahead?
Well, I would say at this stage, the big challenge is to survive, to not be pushed off the cliff into, is it World War III? Is it World War IV? Is it World War VIII? I don't know, but there's never been a time this dangerous. The technology of warfare has moved so far ahead, and even the technology of nuclear weapons, from tiny wee little ones, to great big huge ones, and everything in between, to tactical nuclear weapons and such. It's hard to imagine that we're going to get through this without somebody, pushing that and wanting to push that. And of course, the neocons, the kind of sort of the right wing, far right Jewish polity, Jewish lobby, they seem to have no concern whatsoever about playing complete Russian roulette with the rest of the population. And they've got their places, I guess, in cliffs and things where they can go underground, and people can imagine they'll somehow survive their way through it. Not us, savages and beasts living outside. We'll just do the best we can. Then the money system could break at any time. And so we're seeing, the way militarism is being done is increasingly tied to how the financial structure, how people want these neocons, or the people who, are in the money flow, like the money flow, for instance, that is enormous into Ukraine, where people get their cuts. And, all those Western Europeans are obviously, they're part of it. They're filling their pockets up, like greedy little kids that they are. And to survive, to somehow hold back from nuclear war, Iran is in this, people around the world keep saying, why don't you finish it off? If anybody needs deterrence, it would be your country. If anybody's under assault, it would be your country. and yet there is something to this, well, it's a fatwa. The Ayatollahs, told us this, and it is truly diabolical to unleash that on the world. And it seems that Iran, what it demonstrated in the 12-day war, has found a formula that should keep Israel in line. And I think, the destruction that was done, the targeted, precise hitting of sites, military sites, was, it's amazing. And I guess Israelis are aware of that. And so that in itself, holds the balance of power. But say Iran was to have a nuclear weapon, might not be stabilizing in the Middle East because, or in Eurasia, because as John F. Kennedy had to die and other people had to die, so Israel could get a nuclear weapon, and then the thinking was, well, people behind it, well, Israel has to keep the edge, the advantage, and ever since Israel, walks around and beats its chest and acts with this enormous disparity between it and the other powers in the region, that they have nuclear weapons and the U.S. has nuclear weapons and other people don't. So, it has been raised that if there was another balancing development, that the biggest, most able, most muscular, most intelligent power in the Middle East did have that. Somebody who has demonstrated again and again over the years, these are conscientious people. These are not people that throw around weaponry or even rhetoric carelessly. Many are appealing to you. I've been at New Horizon events, and and I've seen North Korea, people from North Korea just sort of saying, "Come on, we'll help you." Like it's just it's unspeakable. You can't do what you're doing and not have that. And North Korea would be the example, and we'll help you. And they're not the only ones. So Iran has really got a moment of very difficult array of things to consider, and there is definitely a certain fragility to the way things are structured within Iran, that there are people who look at things very differently, and there is a big constituency, who has a big history with the Shah and with dealing with Israel, and maybe family in Israel, who say, well, let's get over it. Let's just put together something and go forward. If it's a little bit surprising to people. And then there is, a genuine bedrock within Iran of people who say, this is a system that we built, that this conforms to who a large number of us are, which is devout Muslims. It's an Islamic system. We had an inspirational founder, Ayatollah Khomeini, and he left us very clear instructions. And we're not letting this slip away. And we may want to change it, but we'll do so ourselves, not through this externally ordered regime change, which is kind of a propaganda term. It sounds kind of benign, but regime change to destroy an ancient heritage, the heritage of Persia, regime change to totally displace the leading figures, the most important intellectuals. Regime change is a horrific ideal. The place that needs regime change, number one, is Israel. Israel definitely needs regime change. And it's so simple. Since they can decide, this and this country should get regime change. No, Israel, you're the greatest threat to the world. And your system is so far beyond repair. You've shown how degraded it is. And, if anybody needs regime change, it is Israel. And of course, in order for that to happen, the United States would also have to change its regime, because it is no longer credible. It's a Zionist colony. And, Zionism, how did this little idea of, having a Jewish state in Palestine, develop and flower, or that sounds like a positive word, maybe flower, but anyway, become more and more strong. So it's now sort of the dominant ethos of the world. Like, we know China, so China been involved with those guys from their founding as a communist country in 1949. Zionism has a certain influence in China. It definitely has a significant influence in Russia. Putin is well aware of Chabad Lubavitch and all of those things. So so regime change. How do we eliminate? Let's not so much think eliminating Israel, but we have Zionism could be sort of declared this is an antisocial, dangerous terrorist ethos. We did that with National Socialism, just declared you can't do that. And by the way, you can't do to the Islamic Revolutionary Guards what you've done to Hamas. You can just see it being set up that they're going to be the scapegoats, the Hamas for the war on Iran, which Netanyahu isn't going to stop if he can. He's got this far. This is his lifelong objective, to set the U.S. to help with the overthrow and regime changeization of Iran. And unless the Israelis themselves somehow put him in an asylum or something and get his hands off the wheel and somehow find, where are you going to find it? It seems like all kinds of people in Israel really do support the genocide, really do think it's a good thing. The majority of Jewish Israelis, they have a media that pushes that. Where are you going to find a decent government? Maybe if Zionism was outlawed, then people in Israel would have to sort of face up to, well, I guess we deserved it. I guess, I don't remember in Auschwitz, I don't remember any stories about bombing the hospital in Auschwitz and killing, the doctors in the hospital in Auschwitz. I remember hearing about and seeing, swimming pools and having drama classes and, an entirely different thing. And let's say if the gas chambers, let's just say the story is true, although it's controversial. When you think of a death with, okay, you're going to have a shower, you go in the shower and, I'm going to die right here and now. Well, that is such an easy death compared to the kind of death that people are having to face in Gaza. And, this, if we can't take care of this is what humanity has to look forward to, because this isn't going to stop in Gaza. And who is the kind of mark of a lot of the neocons? They really don't like having all these white Christians around. And in a way, let's face it, we're kind of at the top of the list for, and are being genocide in a certain way. Like COVID itself was very genocidal, at least from our point of view. In Iran, you maybe got an actual real disease, but in most of the world, the thing was just to get the gene modifying concoction into our bloodstream, nothing to do with curing a respiratory disease. And now there were up to 30, 40 million dead already, just early days. I mean, World War II was only 60 million. So in a certain sense, what's going on in Gaza is the miniature genocide. But the background to it, and Netanyahu and Bourla, are involved, is the big genocide, which is somehow this dictate that humans represent some kind of cancer on the planet, average people. They breathe, we burn, we drive cars, we take plane trips, and the world can't sustain this. So we have to be eliminated, we have to be depopulated, we have to be brought down in numbers. And, how do we deal with that question? And we could work probably cooperatively with Iran on issues like that. The people of Iran, who have their own stories with facing these claims of plague and destruction and having to mask up and take shots and all of this. People in Russia and China, they know all about it. Like there is a sort of expression of the global moments. These injections.
Fantastic. That was very insightful. If you believe that there is an important point that hasn't been addressed in this interview, please share it. We are all ears.
Yes. Okay, I'll just take a little drink here. My mouth gets dry. Well, one of the the big appeal, I think, of this moment in the world is that we've seen, like, it's beyond a genocide, and what's going on in Gaza is beyond a genocide. We don't really have a word for it. It's not really a genocide with the injections, because it's not aimed at a particular ethnic group or religious group, or it's aimed at humanity at large, although there might be within humanity at large groups that are especially targeted. But this, like, if you go along with me that there are 40 million people dead already, and we never saw anything like a concept that, coming out of the very corrupt UN and the US military, that we're going to jab everyone on the planet universally. This is for the whole globe. And this would be kind of like, I think, the highest expression or the lowest expression or the most corrupt demonstration of a global, an effort to do something truly global. And of course, as we looked at our own societies and wondered, well, whether they're violating all our protections and whatnot, and they just ignore the law, but they're all doing it together. They're all making the same set of bad decisions uniformly, indicating that the orders are coming from on high, from places like the Bank of International Settlements. A lot is coming out of Switzerland, out of Geneva and Davos, so here we have our societies decimated. Like, for instance, if your relative gets sick, and suddenly the whole family has to now attend to them, and that one individual can no longer work, but the whole family has to change their pattern of life, and this is happening a lot. And there are theories that our mentality has been destroyed. We're being made more dull, and our characters and personalities have changed because we're not really fully human anymore. We're sort of hominids. Our genetic character has changed, and we're more amenable to having chips planted in us and convergence between computers and biology, biodigital convergence. We see, is his name Havara, the very small Israeli man who talks about hacking into people and whatnot, and this is the way of the future. And so we have this evidence of vast death, yet nobody gets charged. There's no accountability. Rainer Fulmick is in jail, the jurist who took on Volkswagen and Deutsche Bank and won. He was leading up the whole international approach to holding these criminal people, who benefited from the financial aspect of the jab, like somebody like von Leyen, the European Union boss who's not elected. She made a multi-billion-dollar contract in the EU Parliament. So this is, like we're seeing in Gaza, a demonstration that, hey, there's people above the law. The people who are the worst criminals and exploit the situation the worst, they never get charged. But, our little activists and whatnot, or our professors or our students, we're getting criminalized for like something as simple as saying, stop the genocide, just stop it. Just stop doing it, and then we'll talk about, punishment and whatnot. But the fact that nobody gets punished, there's no consequences for things. That this, to me, just becomes intolerable living in societies where the people doing the really big crimes walk around with immunity and they become prime ministers and things. So that to me is, and it's sort of that one situation, although it seems obscure from tanks and battleships and but it's not. It's the days where a hybrid warfare is on so many levels, and the main battlefield is the minds, is our human imagination, how we perceive our attitudes, our behavior. And so that's what I'm seeing as sort of the thing that we could all work on together to get some accountability. And if we could get some accountability for that, then, well, what about accountability for the war crimes? The kind of a thing that, Netanyahu isn't being charged with genocide. He's being charged with crimes against humanity, the starvation. And I think killing people through forced starvation and manipulated and engineered starvation and shooting them as they come and get food and all of that. This is pretty low down, and holding back, thousands of trucks parked in front of the place where people are starving, month after month, year after year. I mean, this is unbelievable in its savagery. So if we could get accountability for the jabs, for the effects, maybe which are soon going to exceed those of World War II, deteriorating people, ruining people, causing people to die slow, agonizing deaths that is happening all over the world. That's where I think we need to put energy, and then a lot would flow from that, because the Gaza genocide and the complete lack of any constraints in how you kill people and make it as ruthless and cruel as possible, might it not flow from the original? Remember, Israel was declared an experiment zone, a laboratory, and Bourla and Netanyahu were doing experiments. And I bet those experiments were largely psychological warfare. October 7 is some kind of expression of all of this being channeled into one event that seems like one event, but it sort of culminates. We can get away with anything. So we'll just create the conditions so we can, finish off the Palestinians and finish off the job of de-Palestinianizing Israel.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your invaluable insights. I hope to have the opportunity to engage in another friendly conversation with you in the near future, if you like. I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Have a great time.
Yes, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.